Chapter 1, Young Mysterious Swordsmanship Tutoring. When talking about Pablo Dina College, people around them have the impression that it is just an ordinary town college in Chabro province. In terms of teaching ability, any well-known college in the kingdom can outshine Pablo Dina College by a large margin. However, not everyone has the qualifications or even the ability to pass the examination to those famous colleges, so a moderately high or low college like Pablo Dina has become their best choice. Pablo Dina College is not located in a prosperous town. The first dean who established the college wanted to allow students to concentrate on their studies and avoid being affected by the prosperity of the town, and corrupted the spirit of learning. Therefore, the college was built in the foothills of the Jurlan Mountains, 10 miles away from the town. When the warm spring breeze blew across the entire Gurland Mountains, the new students had already begun to settle down and become familiar with Pablo Dina College. They would start their own future journeys after 3 years of study, and now they were just a group of fledglings that had not yet spread their wings. Error 500, server error. 1500, that's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. When talking about the swordsmanship of the young instructor, the seniors will say with a sad expression that it is best not to provoke the opponent easily. The opponent's swordsmanship is unimaginable to you, especially the opponent's bad character will be your nightmare. The most important thing is, do not be deceived by his young appearance, or even ignore it. There are always some arrogant people among the new students. They always hope to prove themselves to their classmates by virtue of their abilities, and their first choice is the young swordsmanship instructor. It was just that experience that made Ellie know how important it is to listen to the words of seniors. Elila has never forgotten the scene of the provocation. The young swordsmanship instructor called himself Delan Keshelin. He was dressed in light white fine linen clothes. His long black hair was randomly tied with a strip of cloth. An ordinary wooden sword was inserted at his waist. His hands were folded on his chest. His handsome and young face was ruined by a poker face. After the young teacher introduced himself, he began to explain the requirements of the course. No matter what he arranged, you had to obey him, otherwise you would be responsible for the consequences. The new students seemed to have tried to give the young instructor a blow and started to boo, but the young instructor just stood there quietly, watching the commotion of the students opposite him with a blank expression, as if they were just a group of gossipy women, and turned a blind eye. Until the riot began to subside, a few freshmen who really wanted to cause trouble stood up and provoked, and the content was inevitably high-sounding. Eloa knew one of the troubled freshmen, Sander, the third son of the Theta family whom she had visited with her parents a few years ago. His ancestors were members of the kingdom's Silver Wings. In the year of the Red Rain, he participated in the war against the Osesa barbarians and the Sugro undead. Later, he became a hereditary lord due to military merit. As a descendant of a noble family with military merit, Sander received swordsmanship education since he was a child. It is said that he now has the strength of a low-ranking swordsman. The young instructor didn't care about the opponent's provocation and just casually hooked his hand. Sander and the others, who were already impatient, took out the practice wooden swords from the swordsmanship course and attacked each other. Perhaps because Elle was dazzled, she didn't even see how the young instructor made a move and knocked Sander's wooden sword away. Then she saw those who were provocative and attacking, with Sander falling to the ground, covering their arms and howling and moaning in pain. It seemed that everyone was frightened by this scene, and the original scene of booing was also unusually quiet. The young instructor did not glance at Sander and the others who fell in front of them, and just calmly explained the requirements of today's class. Everyone ran 100 laps around the training ground, even if they climbed at the end. Those who were lazy and escaped midway and pretended to be sick would be expelled from the swordsmanship class. Those who did not want to run could exit immediately. Elalu remembered that at least half of the people withdrew from the swordsmanship training ground at that time. Later, I heard that they went to the dean to complain, but they were reprimanded by the principal. There were pleading words among the people who stayed, but the young instructor looked at them coldly and said simply to leave if he didn't want to. People who can enter the academy will not give up any opportunity to learn to stand out if they have certain ambitions. After seeing the strong strength of the young instructor, giving up at this time is equivalent to losing an important opportunity. Ellie stayed because she wanted to learn swordsmanship. After the Sanders on the ground groaned in pain for a long time, all the others except Sander withdrew from the swordsmanship class. What surprised Elalu was that Sander actually stayed and ran with them, but the young instructor didn't say anything. When lunch was approaching, the young instructor looked at the sky outside the window and randomly named a few students. The young instructor asked them to be responsible for supervision. They were lazy and pretended to be sick. They had to report to him the next day if they left before completing 100 laps. If he verified that the supervisors were hiding the truth with the students, all supervisors would be expelled from the swordsmanship course. It seemed that the irresponsible young instructor left the training ground. After confirming that the young instructor had left for a long time, some of the remaining students began to talk and kept wooing the supervisor designated by the young instructor in an attempt to take a rest and be lazy. On the second day, there were only a dozen or so people left in the swordsmanship training ground. Elalu was glad that she persisted and finally completed the 100-lap task even if she walked, even though this was the biggest hardship she had suffered since she was a child. At that time, Elalu always thought that the departure of the young instructor was the last conscious test for them. Maybe he was hiding in a corner and watching them, so she kept insisting on her idea until the end. Later, after getting acquainted with several classmates, she found that they also had the same idea as her at that time. However, at that time, the reason why the young instructor expelled those who violated the supervision of students was that one of the students was a whistleblower. Such words that aroused resentment and misunderstanding made Elalu understand what the seniors said, that the other party's bad character was indeed a nightmare, because a long time later, the remaining students were treated as objects of suspicion and questioned. In the quiet swordsmanship training ground, the young instructor looked like he was meeting for the first time, but what the young instructor said next made Elalu know how right she was to stay. Those who want to learn swordsmanship from me, I don't care what you think about me. I am only responsible for what kind of students I should teach. People who don't persist, sneak around, and are not determined will just waste my time. No matter what talent you have, if you can't persevere in the end, you will achieve nothing. You will have no hope for your dream future. The same is true. There are no shortcuts in life. You can only keep working hard and move forward steadily. Even if you fall, you have the perseverance to support yourself and get up. Those who give up easily will eventually be losers. And you have passed my assessment at this stage. In the next phase, obey my arrangements. Otherwise, you will bear the consequences. The rules set by the young instructor were to complete 20 laps of running at the training ground every morning, basic sword swing training 1,000 times, and the remaining courses would be taught step by step according to the progress. Elalu, who thought she would spend an ordinary time at Pablo Dina Academy, felt that these 3 years might become much more exciting than she imagined. Having said that, sometimes the age and origin of the young teacher has always been a lively topic. Young, powerful, at least the level of a mid-level swordsman, but most of the teachers in the college do not know the origin of this man named Dilan Keshelin, and the only one who knows the inside story is probably the dean. But every time I want to ask the dean, I can't get a practical answer, and just perfunctory. As for asking the young teacher himself, for those who haven't had the courage to ask until now, just seeing that person's poker face will give you chills. Amid the divergent opinions, the young teacher still maintains his normal daily routine. He has a duplex. In Lee's personal house, you can see him wielding an old king's standard long sword alone in the yard every day before the sun shines. Every morning, after finishing teaching the students, he will return to the house. When some students passed by his house in the afternoon, they saw the young instructor sitting on a chair reading some book at the window. As for the night, no one knew what the young instructor was doing, because no one had seen the young instructor appear at night. It seems that it is such a simple and ordinary life. Elalu has always thought that this is the lifestyle of young teachers, but until what happened at the banquet that day, Elalu learned another truth. Chapter 2: Assassination at the Banquet. The scorching heat after summer started to make people feel listless, but at this time, Ellie had a good rest. Her parents were invited by the young Lord Moray from the small town of Gurland to attend the birthday party. For nobles, every gathering can not only increase the connections between nobles, but also maybe gain some kind of benefit exchange from it. Since receiving the letter from her parents, Elalu has already begun to think about what kind of clothes she should choose for that day's banquet, because Master Sill, whom she secretly loves, may also come to the scene. As the eldest son of Lord Chissen of the Drever family, Seer has shown his intelligence since he was a child. Not only is he outstanding in literary talent, he is also excellent in swordsmanship. Since Elalu's family territory is adjacent to the territory of the Delivo family, her parents had frequent contacts with young Lord Kyson, and it was then that Elalu came into contact with the handsome and outstanding Sill. The feelings hidden in Elalu's heart continue to sprout and grow. Unfortunately, before Elalu can confess, Seal has already been admitted to the Chabro Provincial College of Higher Education and may even go to the Kingdom Central College to study in the future. Elalu, who is a little smarter, has no choice but to enter the Pablo Dina College after failing to pass the exam to the Chabro Provincial College. The main reason why Elalu learns swordsmanship is that she hopes to attract Master Sill's attention after meeting him. Therefore, in the past few months, Elalu has been working hard to follow the teachings of the young teacher and sometimes even increases her training volume. And Elalu has worked hard and feels that her swordsmanship has made great progress. At least when training with Xander, who is excellent in swordsmanship, she can withstand more than 10 moves. If it were 3 months ago, she would have been picked off by the wooden sword without even using a single move. The mystery of the young teacher has become less mysterious due to long-term contact. Because I have become accustomed to what this person looks like, I have become indifferent to him. Pablo Dina College has 4 days of rest every month. If you need to take leave for personal reasons, you need to get the approval of the course teacher on that day. The banquet day happens to be the day of rest, so Elalu doesn't have to worry about not getting approval for her leave. Her parents' carriage will come by then. In addition to expressing her gratitude to the dean and tutor of the college, she also takes Elalu to the banquet. The long-awaited day arrived unknowingly. After visiting their daughter, Elalu's parents began to express their gratitude to the dean of the college. However, the powerful young teacher who Elalu had described was missing. The dean said that he had temporarily left the college because of something and would probably come back tomorrow. When chatting with his daughter Ellie, Sir Carmen heard that his daughter often talked about the young tutor who appeared in the topic, and he became concerned. The person who can be admired by his daughter must be an outstanding talent. As a nobleman, Sir Carmen started to make friends and win over. It was a pity that the absence of the other party made Sir Carmen's family begin to chat about the birthday party of Lord Moray. What made Elalu happy was that her favorite young master seer would also be there, so she began to dress up happily, causing her mother to laugh again and again. As a mother, she still understands her daughter's thoughts. The town of Gurland is named after the Gurland mountain and is considered a prosperous town in the Chabro province. The town of Gurland is an important timber exporter in the province. In particular, the famous black rockwood has been a furniture wood highly praised by the nobles in recent years. Its price has continued to rise to staggering levels. Otherwise, how could the town of Gurland have become wealthy when it lacks field and mine resources? The territory of young Lord Marley happens to be in the Gurland mountain area where black rockwood is produced. Because of this, young Lord Marley's name has also become well known due to the sales of black rockwood. He occasionally comes into contact with big figures like Spiker, which causes people to talk about it. The birthday party invited by young Lord Marley must be a grand banquet. Being able to receive an invitation from Lord Moray also illustrates Sir Carmen's current reputation. Otherwise, the unknown lord would not be able to get that valuable invitation. When Sir Carmen was traveling in the town of Gurland, Sir Carmen began to think about how to make friends with those powerful people at the banquet and how to further the important development of his territory. The residence of the young Lord Moray is not in the town of Gurland. The young Lord Malai, who is wealthy because of the black rock trees, did not invest money in the construction of the town of Gurland. Otherwise, the town of Gurland would not be called a small town. A rare piece of flat land suitable for farming near the small town of Gurland was built by young Lord Moray with a lot of money. The magnificent castle was combined with the manor. The loyal knights were stationed and lived outside the manor to form a protective circle. Its scale and magnificence shocked the visiting Carmen family. I didn't expect that young Lord Moray is so wealthy. I don't know how much gold it would cost just to be on such a scale. Sir Carmen's sigh aroused the approval of Elalu and her daughter. In the past, Elalu thought that the castle and manor of young Lord Sir's family was large enough and magnificent. Unexpectedly, it was even more surprising after seeing the residence of young Lord Moray. If Lord Moray uses the funds to build this place and build it into the town of Gurland, maybe the changes will be even greater. Why doesn't the young master invest the funds in the town? Ellie couldn't help but ask her father when she saw the shabby appearance of young Lord Moray's residence and the town of Gurland. Then you have to ask young Lord Moray. The town of Gurland is famous for its black rock trees, but after the black rock trees are cut down, the town will decline together. Even if it is built, it may be in vain. Perhaps considering this, young Lord Moray gave up the construction of the town of Gurland and instead built his own comfortable castle manor. But after the black rock timber is cut down, how can we support the current castle, manor, and knights without a huge source of funds? Sir Carmen smiled and touched Ellie's head and said, "You will naturally think of young Lord Moray. Don't underestimate everyone's wisdom. As a father, let me tell you one thing. It is rumored that young Lord Moray was behind the sales of black rockwood. So you must remember not to judge everyone easily by your own judgment." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. The grandness of the dinner was indeed beyond the expectations of Elalu's family. Perhaps everyone present did not expect that the banquet continued to unfold in the manor in front of the castle. The moonlight connected with the rope and the magic lamp in the sky illuminated the scene of the banquet. After congratulating the birthday of young Lord Marley, the nobles began to get busy and talk to others. Ellie kept looking for Syl's figure before the banquet started. When she confirmed that Syl was not far away, her whole body and mind relaxed, but in the blink of an eye she was nervous about how to talk to Syl later. However, this problem did not bother her for too long. Not long after the banquet started, Syl and her father, Lord Chissen, came over. When Sir Carmen and young Lord Chissen were talking to each other, Syl also raised his wine glass and smiled at Elalu, nodding to indicate that they were chatting aside. At this time, Elalu felt as if countless little rabbits were running around in her heart. She nervously left with Syl with the nods of her parents. Syl, who had not seen each other for a long time, seemed more mature and steady. Elalu also relaxed while chatting about the recent situation, and the topic, led by Syl, turned to the protagonist of today's banquet, Lord Moray. I was a little surprised to receive a letter from my father asking for leave to come back to attend this banquet. Why would a young lord deserve such attention from my father? It seems that this young Lord Moray is really not that simple. Syl said, looking at the young Lord Moray, who was smiling and chatting with others at the distant dining table. Yes, my father also told me when I came in just now that the young Lord Moray is not as simple as he appears. Ellie, who accompanied Sylph and said so, has not yet thought of why a young Lord Moray deserves such attention from Sylph and his father. Ellie, you have grown up now. You need to understand the future direction of your life. There are different people in your growing life who are worthy of your attention and learning. Only in this way can you continue to strengthen and enrich yourself. Listening to Syl's words to herself, Elalu only thought that she had indeed grown up, and it was time to get married. Could it be that Master Syl also had feelings for her, so he said the previous words? Well, Elalu, are you listening to me? Syl asked strangely, looking at some people with blushing faces and distracted faces. No, we were talking about young Lord Moray just now. Please tell me what there is about him that deserves your attention and learning. Feeling as if she had been distracted, Elalu quickly turned her head in the direction of young Lord Moray. At that moment, Ellie, who had good eyesight, saw a shocking scene. A waiter who was pouring wine at young Lord Marley's table suddenly pulled out a dagger from nowhere, and with a flash of silver arc, Young Lord Malay's head flew into the sky, and the blood on his neck spurted out like a fountain into a column of blood. After a short moment, Ellie's first reaction was to scream. The banquet scene immediately became chaotic and noisy. Everyone was frightened by this scene and ran around. Sylph immediately protected the frightened Ellelu beside him and continued to comfort him. In Sylph's eyes, the assassin who assassinated the young Lord Murray had already disappeared. Ellie, who was holding her head and being stimulated, leaned against Syl and trembled. Her first scream when young Lord Murray was assassinated just now seemed to have attracted the attention of the assassin. Before the assassin withdrew, he briefly looked at her. Those cold and ruthless eyes seemed to pierce her heart, making her constantly frightened. It was as if the illusion of death was lingering in her mind. For the first time since she was a child, she felt this kind of inner fear and fear. It was like a devil constantly torturing her soul. Young Lord Marley's grand birthday party ended with an inexplicable assassination for his death. Chapter 3: The Familiar Pair of Eyes and That Person. On the carriage back to Pablo Dina College, Sir Carmen and his wife kept comforting Ellie, who was like a frightened lamb. The sheriff of the town of Gurlin and the knight captain of the escort of the young Lord Murray began to intervene in the investigation. The truth may be known the next day. At the same time, Ellelu was not the only one who was frightened. Many of the nobles and their female relatives were frightened and fainted at the scene. Many nobles had decided to leave the town of Gurland at night because they were worried that the next assassination might happen to them. Sir Carmen and his wife stayed, not only to take care of the frightened Ellelu, but also to attend the funeral of Lord Murray. Ellie, who was shivering in a corner of the carriage, kept replaying the scene of Baron Murray being beheaded in her mind, especially the last look between the assassin and her, which constantly stimulated and strengthened the fear in her heart. The more she thought about it, the more fearful and painful she became, but when the scene that stimulated her echoed for a long time, those cold and ruthless eyes suddenly appeared with a familiar feeling as if she had seen it somewhere, but Ellie thought in her heart that it was an hallucination caused by the stimulation given to her by the assassin that had penetrated into her bones. The constant physical and mental torture and the comfort from her parents made Ellie begin to fall into a deep sleep without knowing it. The news of the assassination of Lord Murray spread quickly throughout the Gurland Mountains area the next day, and even spread in further directions. There was a lot of discussion in Pablo Dina College, and Ellelu, who was frightened by the scene and asked to take leave to recover, became the focus of the students for a while. Assassination of nobles, such explosive news, has also plunged the peaceful Chabrol province into excitement. Such things are not common in the kingdom, because assassinating nobles is tantamount to challenging the bottom line of the entire kingdom's aristocracy, and all aristocrats will unanimously report to the outside world. According to the investigation, the assassin was a distant nephew of Butte, the assistant to the housekeeper of Major Lord Murray. Butte did not show up on the night of the banquet. When the sheriff and the captain of the night escort of the town of Gurland immediately tracked down Butte's home, they found that he had been killed at home. However, after careful search, they found 100 kinners from the fireplace in Butte's house. As a housekeeper's assistant, Butte's salary was only 20 kinners a year. Butte, who had only served in the house of Major Murray for 5 years, would never have such a huge sum of money. So the murderer must have bribed Butte to sneak into the attendance at the banquet that night. On the eve of the assassination, he killed Butte in advance to cut off his secret. According to the testimony of the butler and the maid at the time, Butte's nephew was brought into the house of Lord Murray that morning to act as a temporary attendant. Since everyone was busy with the birthday party of Lord Murray that day, no one paid attention to the newcomer. One of the attendants said that he left for a while when he and Butte's nephew were sorting the main table, and the assassin's murder weapon was probably placed under the table at that time and covered with a tablecloth. That night, the assassin used his identity as a servant to pour wine at the table of Lord Murray, took out the murder weapon, and suddenly launched an assassination. He took the opportunity to escape and disappear in the chaos of the crowd. However, the appearance of the so-called Butte's nephew is vague, because according to the maid who had an impression of the murderer, he looked very ordinary, as if he had caught someone randomly in the town of Gerland. This problem has troubled the sheriff and the captain of the guard knights. Several days have passed, and there is no news about the murder. However, the news of such a big assassination of the nobles has spread throughout the kingdom. The pressure from the young Countess Murray and the nobles are unanimously concerned about this. It is even said that even the king is interfering with the progress at this time. If the murderer is not found again, it is estimated that the future of the sheriff and the captain of the guard knights will be ruined. In the end, the sheriff and the captain of the guard knight colluded together because, according to all the witnesses, the murderer's appearance was particularly popular, so they teamed up to do a frightening thing, a big drama that was hidden from everyone. On that day, the sheriff hurriedly reported to the young Countess Murray that his men had traced the hidden footprints of the murderer and needed the captain of the guard knights to jointly arrest him. With the young countess' eager consent, the captain of the guard knights took his trustworthy men into the depths of the Gerland mountains and brought the one they had prepared. In order to create convincing evidence, the captain of the escort knight even joined forces with his men to massacre all the people brought by the sheriff. When they returned to the town of Gerland with the murderer and the unjustly killed sheriff's men, they immediately caused a sensation. In order to confirm whether the murder was real, the young countess also asked the maid, who had an impression at the time, to confirm the face of the dead murderer. Since the maids were vague about the appearance of the murderer at the time, some similarities made them uneasy and determined that it was the murderer. The fact that the dead sheriff's men were killed because they lost in a fight with the murderer is also important and convincing evidence. It must have been the murderer's resistance at that time, and the sheriff's men, who were weak in terms of strength, were brutally killed. The sheriff and the guard knight captain survived the crisis in a cold sweat. As for the murderer's various motives, this was no longer their concern. The murder had already been executed and could be explained to everyone. The curtain began to fall on the noisy assassination incident, but there was one person who always believed that it was not the murderer, but she did not tell anyone this. Ellie happened to be present when the body was confirmed. Sir Carmen and his wife specially took her to witness the murderer's body in order to help their daughter overcome the fear in her heart. In the murderer's eyes that seemed to stare at death, she intuitively knew that this was not the murderer, because those were not the cold and heartless eyes she had seen at all. Recalling those eyes, the fear is no longer as strong as before, but a strange feeling of familiarity keeps coming to my heart. Why do I seem to know those eyes before? Is it really my hallucination? It wasn't until Ellie thought she was healthy again that she returned to the swordsmanship training ground and saw the eyes of the young instructor. She knew why those eyes gave her a sense of familiarity, because the eyes of her young instructor were like this. He is the murderer of Draxlin. Xiaolon looked at the female student not far away, who seemed to be named Elalu, holding a wooden sword and looking at him tremblingly. There was fear and uneasiness in her eyes, as if she was about to collapse at any time, which made him frown slightly. However, he did not expect that this subtle expression made the other students suddenly scream and faint. All the students stopped training with their wooden swords and began to mess around. Seeing the students surrounding Elalu who had fainted, Xiaolon waved her hand and asked people to take her to the medical room. The rest continued to train. If they were distracted, they would be punished. It seemed that he had been negligent. Unexpectedly, the brief exchange of glances with the female student that day made the other girl recognize her. Such a keen intuition. She needed to take some safety measures. She signaled for the students to continue training. Xiaolon left the training ground and walked towards the treatment room. After being diagnosed by a therapist, Elalu was fine. She just fainted suddenly due to some stimulation. She may have been frightened again when she thought of the assassination that day while training swordsmanship. She just needed to lie quietly for a while, and she would be fine. When Xiaolon came to the treatment room, the students who sent Elalu to see the young teacher came and immediately said that they would go back to train and finish the arranged courses. Anyway, the therapist had confirmed that Elalu was fine and just needed to lie quietly in the treatment room for a while. As for why Xiaolon came here suddenly, they only maliciously thought that the teacher came to see them and deliberately slacked off to punish them. Looking at Elalu lying on the training bed, her beautiful little face was pale and her eyelashes were beating slightly. The therapist was fiddling with things elsewhere at this time. Xiaolon walked to a chair next to Elalu's bed and sat down. Speak, I know you are awake and your breathing became rapid when I came over, so there is no need to pretend anymore. Xiaolan's voice was very small, but it was enough for Elalu on the bed to hear. After hearing Xiaolan's words again, Elalu half opened her eyes like a frightened rabbit and said in a trembling voice, "Teacher, what's the matter?" "Forget what you've seen, or you and your parents will be the stars of the day." After saying this, Xiaolan left her seat and returned to the training ground, leaving Ellie's face even paler. She knew that the young instructor had noticed her discovery. If she dared to tell this matter, then she and her parents would end up like the young Lord Murray. At that moment, Ellie suddenly had the intention of quitting the academy. The chirping of cicadas brought by the summer afternoon was noisy throughout the season. Xiaolon, who was lying on a chair and resting quietly, looked at the ceiling above his head. He didn't know since when he liked to be in a daze like this. It has been so many years since I came to this familiar yet unfamiliar world, and the memories of my previous life began to blur with time. Only in such a quiet environment can I occasionally recall the past. Time keeps wasting away everything about him, and his ruthless self just wants to live simply. He has no partners, no relatives, only himself. This is like a dream and a blur. When will I wake up, and when will it end? Maybe I will be in this dream for the rest of my life. What is the meaning of life in this dream? Close your eyes, open your eyes. Host name, Derangshalin. Occupational level, median swordsman 29. Life, 290,290. Talent, cut off. Ability, pretend to be a swordsman and enter the desperate situation of death quickly. Mission, a 3-year swordsmanship instructor at the Pablo Dina Academy in Chabro Province. Can receive other tasks. Chapter for the past that belongs 1. In the early autumn of the year of mists and flowers, the military town of Lydan in the northern part of the kingdom of Adria. Among the defense lines in the northern part of the kingdom to resist the invasion of Osasa barbarians, the position of Lydan military town in the northern defense line does not appear to be as important as other military towns. It seems that its existence is just a common offensive and defensive assistance place to contact other military towns. Every time the Osasa barbarians invade, Lydan military town faces the dangers they faced were far lower than other military towns. Even during the autumn frost invasion of the northern defense line of the Kingdom of Adria by the Osasa barbarians, Lydan military town did not meet even a single Osasa barbarian. Therefore, there were rumors in other military towns about the irony of going to Lydan if you wanted to be gilded on the front line, promoted, and wealthy. Recently, Lydan military town has replaced a group of sergeants, and I heard that they are all gilded nobles from the royal capital. In Lydan military town, any news spreads quickly. Most of the people living here are the family members of the soldiers and officers stationed here, and every household is familiar with them over the years. At the end of every summer, the Osasa barbarians are used to going south to plunder the Adria kingdom. As for the size of the invasion, it depends on whether any changes have happened to the enemy on the opposite side. According to reports from merchant spies who returned from Osesu in the north, there has been no change this year. The changes in the northern grassland 2 years ago have left the Osasa barbarians still unable to recover, so there is probably no need to worry too much about the invasion of the northern defense line this time. Perhaps this news made the nobles in the royal capital excited, so before the Osasa barbarians invaded, they sent a group of nobles to replace some of the sergeants in the military